This video is sponsored by Lutema. More on that in a little bit. We've talked about solar energy 100 times on this channel, but every time we do, we typically talk about photovoltaic, the process of taking in photons from sunlight, knocking out electrons in a semiconductor, and harnessing electricity. But there's actually another way to produce electricity from the sun, and that is a solar thermal energy plant. So one company had the crazy idea of actually building a large-scale power plant in just this way, in the high desert of Nevada. Unfortunately, Nevada's Crescent Dune solar thermal plant failed just a few years after they started. What the heck happened? Was this just a bad idea? Or was there a timing involved or some other aspect to the technology that we could learn from? We thought this epic failure deserved a deeper dive today on Tupa Da Vinci. Anybody who lives in Southern California, if you've driven to Vegas recently, you know that huge solar farm with mirrors everywhere? Yeah, that's Crescent Dune. I've seen it so many times and I wondered how they were doing. I figured they were doing well. Turns out not so much. Startup energy venture Solar Reserve, backed by a handful of renewable energy investment groups and a sizable bump from the US government, set out to develop what was going to be promised as a truly remarkable breakthrough in energy production and storage. We'll get to that. The project, as you mentioned, wasn't just another solar farm idea, but a concentrated solar power plant with a central receiver tower and advanced molten salt energy storage technology. So what exactly makes this kind of power plant different? Remember when you were a kid and you had a magnifying glass and you tried to burn ants, or in my case, burn initials on like a wooden fence? Well, that is pretty much the idea. The Crescent Dunes plant was located about 200 miles northwest of Las Vegas. It featured over 10,000 movable motorized mirrors called heliostats. Each heliostat is made up of 35 6 feet by 6 feet mirror facets, yielding a heliostat overall usable area of 1,200 square feet. And the total solar field aperture added up to about 12 million square feet. Each one of these mirrors is fine-tuned to bounce incoming solar radiation to a mathematically precise angle to hit the exact spot on the top of the tower containing a molten salt solution. The combined concentrated solar energy can reach temperatures of upwards of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. CSPs, concentrated solar power, are generally considered to be more efficient, operating between 30 and 40% efficiency compared to 20% for a PV farm, and is capable of producing tens to hundreds of megawatts of power. Crescent Dune boasted an installed capacity of 110 megawatts. But what sets these systems apart from traditional PV farms is that they also have mechanisms to store the energy they produce. Instead of converting solar energy into electricity, CSPs convert solar energy into thermal energy, which they can then store in a molten salt core inside that 640-foot-high central tower. Once it's melted, the salt moves into a storage tank where it gets used to produce steam. That steam moves turbines, which then produce electricity so that the folks in Vegas can spend hours playing the slots. Just one more pull and I know I'm gonna win big, right? That means the sun goes down and that plant is still producing energy long into the night. Once used, it can be cycled back through the receiver to the reheater. And it's such a game changer, in fact, that you could arguably not even need peaker power plants because, well, until maybe 2 a.m. in the morning, you wouldn't need to have any other form of energy. The prospect of Crescent Dune seems so exciting that the US Department of Energy gave it its full support, including some financial backing to the tune of over $500 million. Initially, the plant was expected to produce over 40,000 megawatt hours every month and over 480,000 megawatt hours annually. From the get-go, construction delays offset deadlines by several months. Then by the time it finally got up and running in September 2015, the plant only operated for 8 months before it had to shut down due to a leak in the molten salt storage system. Basically like a flood of liquid, hot magma. Austin Powers, baby. Yeah, not good. Even once all that was sorted, by 2018, the average capacity was only around 20% compared to the original projection of 50%. At its absolute peak production in May 2019, the company only achieved about half of its original production goals, and only about for 9 months. Regular outages and equipment failures eventually led the plant's sole buyer, Nevada Energy, to pull out of the arrangement, telling regulators that the project posed the most significant risk to its ability to meet the renewable energy portfolio goals. That stings. Before the end of 2019, the plant officially ceased operation. So what exactly went wrong with the Crescent Dunes power plant? And is it a signal that all these people who hate green energy initiatives were right, that it can't actually work? But before I answer that, let me tell you about our sponsor this week, Lutema. I know masks and respirators can be controversial, but Lutema is the U.S. mask company that is manufacturing masks right here in San Diego. In the early days of the pandemic, the U.S. was caught totally off guard as mask manufacturing was happening in China, really showcasing the national security need for critical manufacturing right here at home. N95 and K95 standards can be confusing, but Lutema's custom M-Series line brings some clarity and even adds standards for children's masks. Their respirators up the performance from 95% to 99% filtration as tested, come in fun different colors, and are really pushing the industry for better public mask standards. In fact, you've probably seen some pretty famous people wearing their masks. Masks and respirators are just tools like any other, tools that can help us get back to normal, things like traveling for me and school for my son. So use the link lutema.com/discount/TBDV20 to save 20% on your order today. Huge thanks to Lutema and you for supporting the companies that support this show. While CSP technology does boast some benefits like energy storage after the sun goes down, it's still really early in the life cycle of development. One major factor is cost. When the technology began to debut in 2009, concentrated solar power cost per megawatt was extremely competitive with photovoltaic. Aside from the failure of pumps and maintenance and leaks in the molten salt reactor tank, there was a bigger problem. Projects like this take years to get off the ground. So odds are people who were building this technology were thinking about this and pitching investors as early as 2010. And I did the math. The cost of photovoltaic power was about $2 per watt. Well, then something really interesting happened. By 2020, that price has dropped from $2 all the way down to about 30 cents per watt. That is what the company didn't see coming. And this is a typical problem that many people face. When people think about adoption curves, they do not understand just how quickly they ramp up.
A question.
Sure.
If it's already built, why shut it down? Wouldn't it just keep on making energy?
That's a great question. The reason why it doesn't make sense anymore is because of the price you'd have to sell the energy to run at cost. So for example, imagine you have maintenance teams that are doing all the mirror cleaning up, right? You've got people greasing all the joints and stuff for the motors. You've got people dealing with the molten salt tank. That all costs money. So if you want to be able to pay all those salaries for the 5,000 people, 2,000 people, whatever it is, who are working at that plant, well, you got to be able to pay them. The only way to do that is to then take whatever you produce and sell that for an equivalent amount of money to be profitable. Right? Well, that number was about 4 times higher than a traditional solar panel farm. And for that reason, they spent $1 billion in the desert with these mirrors, and they can't even operate it. They can't turn it on because it would lose them money. That is the heartbreaking part about this. I love that they tried it, that investors gave it a shot. I love all that about it. I feel like this is a good telltale sign for all the innovators out there. Remember the S-curve of adoption. You got to remember that like electric vehicle adoption, battery technology adoption isn't going to be some slow curve. There's going to be a slow part and then it is going to ramp up in an S-curve fashion. This is the part of technology disruption that almost everybody gets wrong. People are saying EVs might be half of all car sales by 2040. I think that's way wrong. The price of solar has dropped so much that if you go back in time and think, okay, if you want to make a 40 megawatt hour plant, that would have cost $80 billion in photovoltaic panels to build a farm of comparable size. But today, it's only $12 billion, almost an 8x reduction in price. And that's what caused them so much trouble. Now, it's much harder for newer, less established technologies like CSP to compete. But by the end of its run, Crescent Dune was costing Nevada Energy $135 per megawatt hour. Compare that to roughly $30 per megawatt hour available from a PV farm located in the same area in Nevada. It just didn't make any financial sense. So fundamentally, this came down to an issue of scale. The thought was, sure, one photovoltaic panel makes sense, and if you get 10 of them on a roof for a customer, that's cool. But how are we going to build a plant that can produce 40,000 megawatt hours using these panels? The thought was that it would just cost too much to scale up. And that was kind of true back in 2010, but no one again saw the price drop issue. And this is one of those other challenges of engineering, which is understanding scale. For example, if I tried to make a pumped hydro storage system by taking a 5 or 25 gallon drum and putting it on my roof and pumping water up there when there's extra energy from the sun, and then letting it come back down and run a turbine when I needed it, I would be way in trouble because that just isn't a cost-effective way in such a small scale. Pumped hydro can work. In the right location, when you have a large tank, a reservoir on top and bottom, you can make that very attractive in terms of cost per energy storage per kilowatt hour. But that doesn't work for a small system. And this is kind of the problem. They thought, I know, mirrors are cheap. We can build millions of mirrors, have motors, control it all. All these parts are not really that exotic. We can build something at a much larger scale. But by doing so, you introduce a lot of complexion, moving parts. You have motors that need lubrication and maintenance for adjusting the mirror locations. And again, molten salt. You can imagine what that must be like to handle, right? And this was the problem. Don't worry, there's still going to be tons of solar power plants, but we're not going to probably see as many of these molten type. We will still see them. They are still out there, but I think photovoltaic prices have come down so much that it just makes way more sense to build future plants with them. But there is still one issue, right? We mentioned the concentrated solar thermal does have energy storage built right in. Molten salt is going to stay hot, and as long as it does, it can continue to make power after the sun goes down. This is just not going to be the case with photovoltaic, and that's where you got to couple these plants with battery storage. We did a video on the iron flow battery built by CSS. We had a little lab tour. We'll put a link in the video description here. They have a solution. Tesla has mega packs. There's going to be tons of storage coming online. And I think what we need to do is use photovoltaic for the generation, and we had to couple that with an easier, more efficient form of storage, as opposed to combining the two. So does Crescent Dune spell the end of solar thermal energy? Well, I think it will make it a harder pill to swallow in the future, but it's not over yet. New designs include alternative welding practices to improve methods of relocating heat and cold salt pumps to reduce the need for longer pumping shafts and reduce downstream infrastructure cost, which could help make CSP technology more accessible. Endeavors like China's Subcon Solar have exceeded 6-month output targets at its Belinga Tower in Qinghai Province. Bright Source's solar thermal system in California's Mojave Desert currently sits at the largest solar thermal plant in the world. And while Crescent Dune ultimately failed, data mined from its collapse is continuing to inform current and future projects in hopes of making this technology more reliable and cost-effective. But what do you think? Is CSP technology going to be the solar wave of the future? Should the US government place itself in the position of playing benefactor on new green technology at the taxpayer's expense? And what other green energy production and storage technologies are you excited about? Sound off in the comments below. But before you go, real quick, we have just enough time for the comment of the week. Become my favorite part of the show, by the way. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. So the first comment comes from Mitchell Smith. This is in regard to our mining helium-3 on the moon video. He says, and others of you have noted, I was pronouncing tritium wrong. I said tritium, and it's tritium. So thank you, Mitchell, for being kind about it and pointing that out. I appreciate you.
To be fair, tritium sounds way better.
Tritium sounds like tri-tip. I think you're hungry. You might just be hungry. And this is a new one that's becoming more popular. This is on our Aptera video. Mattis says, waiting for Thunderfoot. So Thunderfoot is a YouTube channel that debunks things. And they did a video on the solid state hydrogen video that we made. And so suddenly like there was an influx of people who came in. And now they just say, whenever I make a new video, waiting for Thunderfoot to debunk it or something. I don't know. Good for you. Awesome. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Check out other videos. We'll see you soon.